What if I told you that you could have everything? A devoted husband, a beautiful daughter, financial security, and throw it all away in 7 weeks? That you could mistake boredom for unhappiness and excitement for love? This is my story, and I'm still trying to figure out if I made the biggest mistake of my life. I'm not going to tell you my name, but I need to get this off my chest because everyone in my life either thinks I'm brave or thinks I'm an idiot, and honestly, I'm starting to think they might both be right. I met Zach at a house party when I was 17. He was 18, mature, the kind of guy who actually had his life together. Within 5 minutes, I could tell he was going somewhere, unlike all the other losers still living with their parents and working at gas stations. He told me about his plans for college, his business degree, his future. I was already picturing myself with someone who was going to make real money someday instead of dating broke idiots who thought McDonald's counted as romance. When he asked for my number, I played it cool. But inside, I was thinking about how jealous my friends were going to be. We moved in together after 6 months. Fast? Maybe. But when you know, right? His apartment was actually nice. Not some disgusting bachelor pad with pizza boxes everywhere. He was already talking about getting a better place once he graduated. I loved how he planned everything out, how he actually had goals. My mom kept making comments about how I was too young to be playing house, but she'd been divorced twice, so maybe she wasn't the best person to take relationship advice from. The Australia trip when I turned 21 was absolutely incredible. The best part? Zach paid for basically everything, because he was already making decent money at this tech company. Amazing hotels, actual restaurants, not ramen like most people our age. He took pictures of me on the beaches, kept saying how he wanted to remember every moment. Sweet, I guess, though sometimes he got a little too sentimental about stuff. New Zealand was even better. He surprised me with this helicopter tour that cost like $800. I was posting photos on Facebook, thinking about how jealous everyone back home must be. When he proposed on my 21st birthday, I wasn't even that surprised. We'd been talking about marriage for months, but the ring was way bigger than I expected, which showed he was really serious about impressing me. All my friends were losing their minds over the photos. It felt pretty good to be the first one in our group to get engaged to someone who actually had his life together. We had a long engagement because he wanted to save up for the perfect wedding. Sometimes I got impatient with how careful he was about money, but I guess that's better than being with someone completely irresponsible about finances. The wedding when I was 26 was basically perfect. Zach handled most of the expenses without even complaining. He kept saying how he wanted me to have everything I'd dreamed of. The whole day felt like something out of a magazine. Dancing with him at the reception, I thought, this is exactly the life I pictured for myself. Married to someone successful who treats me well and can actually provide a good lifestyle. The honeymoon in Italy was amazing, though he spent a little too much time taking pictures instead of just enjoying the moment. Getting pregnant 2 years later wasn't exactly planned, but Zach got so excited about becoming a dad that his enthusiasm rubbed off on me. He immediately started converting the spare room into a nursery, researching cribs and car seats. When I had morning sickness, he brought me crackers in bed every day. Never complained about me not being able to cook dinner. The whole pregnancy, he was constantly asking how I was feeling, if I needed anything. Sometimes I felt like he was treating me like I was made of glass. When Avery was born, Zach literally cried when he held her for the first time. Kind of embarrassing, but it showed how much he cared, I suppose. He took 2 weeks off work. He was probably better at diaper changing than I was at first. Watching him make silly faces and talk in that ridiculous baby voice, I could see he was going to be one of those dads completely wrapped around his daughter's finger. Cute and all, but sometimes I wondered if he was going to become boring once he had kids. The first couple of years of Avery's life were pretty good overall, though I definitely missed having more freedom. Zach was making really good money, so I didn't have to work. But staying home all day with a baby gets old pretty fast. He'd come home every evening and immediately want to play with Avery. Great father behavior, I guess. But then he'd disappear outside for like 2 hours to smoke, and I was stuck dealing with bath time and bedtime by myself. When I complained, he always said he needed that time to decompress from work. But honestly, I was the one dealing with a cranky toddler all day. Who's really more stressed out here? By the time Avery turned 2, I was starting to feel pretty restless. Don't get me wrong. I loved being provided for, not worrying about money. But watching Zach come home and immediately light up a cigarette was getting really annoying. When I brought it up, he got defensive, said it helped him relax. but it just seemed selfish to prioritize smoking over spending time with his family. When a job opportunity came up in March 2020 to be a personal assistant to some company director, I was actually excited about getting out of the house and having adult conversations again. When I mentioned it to Zach, he got this weird look on his face, started asking all these questions about what kind of company it was and who I'd be working with. I told him it was mostly men in the office, and he actually suggested maybe I should look for something else. That honestly pissed me off. Who was he to tell me what jobs I could take? Starting the new position was like a breath of fresh air after being stuck at home for 2 years. The office environment was so much more interesting than I expected. All the guys were actually pretty friendly and funny. My boss, Dean, was especially cool. He had this confidence about him that was really attractive, and he actually listened when I talked, instead of just nodding like Zach sometimes did. When the guys invited me to grab drinks after work, I started saying yes more often. I deserved to have some fun. About 3 weeks into the job, I noticed I was thinking about work even when I was home. Zach started making comments about how I seemed distracted. He'd be talking to me, and I'd realize I hadn't been listening because I was thinking about something Dean said or planning what I was going to wear tomorrow. When Avery wanted me to read to her, I found myself getting impatient because I'd rather be texting with my coworkers about inside jokes from the office. The thing that really bothered me was how Zach assumed I should just be completely satisfied with our little domestic routine forever. He'd come home, want to hear about my day, but when I talked about people I worked with, he'd get this look like he was analyzing everything I said. Then he'd go outside to smoke for 2 hours, while I dealt with getting Avery dinner and cleaning up. When he came back smelling like cigarettes, he wanted to act like we were this happy family. I started leaving my wedding ring on the bathroom counter when I got ready for work. It got in the way when I was typing. And honestly, it felt kind of liberating not to have that constant reminder that I was supposed to be defined by being someone's wife. We were at this family day out, Avery running around the playground, when Zach suddenly grabbed my hand and asked where my wedding ring was. The way he said it, all panicked and hurt, immediately put me on the defensive. It's just a piece of jewelry, and the fact that he was making such a big deal about it showed how insecure he was. I told him I left it at home because I didn't want to lose it, but he gave me this look like he knew I wasn't telling the whole truth. Then he asked the question that just pissed me off completely. What's going on? Where has my wife gone? Like I'm supposed to be the exact same person forever just because we got married. Sitting there listening to him act all confused and worried, I realized I was just done pretending everything was fine when it wasn't. I looked at him holding Avery on his lap, both of them looking at me expectantly, and I thought about how this was probably going to be my life for the next 20 years if I didn't do something about it. I told him we needed to talk when we got home. The whole drive back, he tried to make conversation like normal, but I could barely focus. All I could think about was how I'd been feeling more alive in the past 3 weeks at work than I had in years. When we got home and put Avery down for her nap, I just came out and said it. There was no point in dragging it out. I love you, but I'm not in love with you anymore. His whole face just crumbled like I'd physically hit him. He started asking what he did wrong, whether we could work on things. But I was already past that point. I'd been thinking about this for weeks. I explained that he was a great dad and a great provider, but that wasn't enough anymore. I needed more than just financial security and someone who's good with our daughter. When he suggested marriage counseling, I told him it was too late. My mind was already made up. The conversation got intense when he started begging me to reconsider, saying we could fix whatever was wrong. But I just sat there thinking how pathetic it was that he was willing to completely change who he was just to keep me around. Like, if he was the right person for me, I wouldn't be feeling this way in the first place, right? I told him I wanted to separate, and that I'd need money to get my own place and start over. Even though he looked like I'd just destroyed his entire world, he agreed to remortgage the house to give me $15,000. He said he'd sell that luxury SUV and give me half the profits. Honestly, it was the least he could do, considering I was the one starting completely over. Moving into my own apartment felt like this huge weight had been lifted off my shoulders. The first thing I did was download Tinder. It had been so long since I'd felt desired by anyone other than Zach. Within the first day, I had like 50 matches, a pretty good ego boost. Some of these guys were really attractive and successful, all so eager to take me out and show me a good time. I started going on dates pretty regularly. It was amazing how different it felt to be with men who were actually trying to impress me instead of just assuming I'd always be there. About 7 weeks after I moved out, I'd been on 5 different dates. 2 of the guys I really connected with, and we ended up sleeping together. It felt incredible after being with the same person for 12 years. There's something so exciting about being with someone new who's exploring your body for the first time and actually paying attention to what you like. I was finally feeling like myself again instead of just Zach's wife or Avery's mom. Then Zach called out of nowhere, saying he wanted closure, asking direct questions about whether I'd been seeing other people. At first, I tried to avoid the topic because honestly, it was none of his business, but he kept pushing. Finally, I just told him the truth. I'd been on 5 dates and slept with 2 of them. The silence on the other end was so long I actually checked to see if he'd hung up. When he finally responded, he sounded completely broken. How could I move on so fast? Did I ever really love him at all? The thing that bothered me about his reaction was how he was acting like I'd committed some terrible crime by dating other people when we were literally separated. I tried to explain that I needed to feel wanted and appreciated, which was something I wasn't getting from him, but he just kept saying he couldn't believe I threw away 12 years for some random guys I met on an app. Finally, I lost it and told him the truth I'd been thinking for weeks. I needed to prioritize my happiness over his, and honestly over Avery's too, because I couldn't be a good mother if I was miserable in my own life. The way he reacted, like I'd said something completely shocking, just proved how little he actually understood about what I was going through. About 8 months later, I met Dean again outside of work, and we really hit it off. He was confident, successful, and he actually pursued me instead of just assuming I'd stick around like Zach always did. When we made our relationship official on Facebook, I made sure to post lots of photos of us looking happy together. I wanted everyone to see how much better my life was now. Being with Dean was so different from being married to Zach. He actually made an effort to keep things exciting and romantic. Nice restaurants, weekend trips, always telling me how beautiful I was. Sure, he hasn't talked about moving in together or anything that serious, but we're still getting to know each other. The sex is amazing. He's always surprising me with little gifts or planning fun dates. The only downside is I don't get to see Avery as much as I used to. But honestly, she seems fine when she's with Zach. His family spoils her constantly anyway. I make sure to spend quality time with her when I have her. I think it's probably good for her to see her mom happy and fulfilled instead of just going through the motions. When she gets older, she'll understand that sometimes people need to make difficult choices to live authentic lives. But lately, I've been thinking more about my old life, wondering if maybe I made some mistakes in how I handled everything. Dean still hasn't brought up anything about the future. When I hint about maybe spending more time together, he always changes the subject. I see Zach sometimes when I pick up Avery, and he looks really good, like he's been working out and taking care of himself. He's always polite but distant when we talk. I heard from a mutual friend that he's been dating other women, which honestly bothers me more than I expected. He never seemed like the type to move on that quickly. So I finally decided to reach out and try to have an honest conversation about everything that happened. I sent him this really heartfelt text explaining how I've been thinking about our relationship and how maybe we both made mistakes. I apologized for some of the hurtful things I said and asked if he thought there was any possibility of us trying again, but he never even responded, which honestly just shows how stubborn and unforgiving he can be. I mean, I get that he's hurt, but if he really loved me, wouldn't he at least want to talk about working things out? The thing that really frustrates me is how he just gave up without even trying to fight for us. When we first got together, he would have done anything to make me happy. But when our marriage was actually in trouble, he just accepted my decision and moved on with his life. I keep thinking about how different things might be if he had actually chased after me and shown me how much I meant to him, instead of just letting me walk away. Now he's apparently dating all these other women and acting like he's perfectly fine without me, which honestly seems pretty cold considering we have a daughter together. I tried calling him a few weeks ago and actually got through. I asked him directly why he never fought for our relationship. His response was so typical. He said he respected my decision and that he's not going to beg someone to stay who doesn't want to be there. But that's exactly the problem. Sometimes people need to see how much they're valued instead of just being taken for granted. I explained that I needed more attention and affection than he was giving me, and that if he had made more effort to make me feel special, maybe things would have been different. He listened to everything I said, and then told me he hopes I'm happy with Dean and that he's moved on with his life. When I asked if he could ever forgive me for the way things ended, he was quiet for a long time. Then he said, "Some things can't be undone." Honestly, that's such bullshit. because people make mistakes in relationships all the time. And if you really love someone, you should be willing to work through problems instead of just holding grudges forever. I think he's just being stubborn and trying to punish me for choosing my own happiness over his comfort zone. The more I think about it, the more I realize I'm probably missing my old life more than I'm missing him specifically. Having that financial security, not worrying about rent or bills, that was really nice. I miss having daily access to Avery instead of just seeing her on weekends. Dean's great and all, but he's not exactly in the same financial league as Zach. Sometimes I wonder if I gave up too much stability for what turned out to be just excitement and novelty. But then I remember how bored and unappreciated I felt in my marriage, and I think about how I deserve to be with someone who actually prioritizes making me happy, instead of just assuming I'll stick around no matter what. Right?